Polycystic ovary syndrome is named for a structural defect, yet the hallmark cysts on the ovary are not actually cysts. Instead, as we can see in this blueprint of the human endocrine system, the condition is a highly complex, self-amplifying neuroendocrine and metabolic feedback loop. The condition is widely misunderstood as a metabolic disorder driven primarily by obesity. Clinical data proves otherwise. Furthermore, the root pathology does not even originate in the reproductive organs. To understand how this syndrome operates, we have to map the biological signaling starting from the brain, traveling through the ovaries, and cascading into systemic metabolism. Tracing this exact multi-system architecture explains how a single, localized signaling error aggressively scales into a total body syndrome. We begin with the healthy baseline of the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian, or HPO, axis. Under normal conditions, the hypothalamus releases gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH, in steady, rhythmic pulses down to the pituitary gland. The pituitary responds to this rhythm by secreting a balanced ratio of follicle-stimulating hormone, FSH, and luteinizing hormone, LH. In PCOS, the pituitary develops an increased sensitivity to GnRH. The result is a rapid, erratic firing pattern from the brain. This accelerated pulse frequency disproportionately drives up the production of LH. The LH levels spike dramatically, pushing the LH to FSH ratio well above 1, while FSH remains relatively low. This skewed signaling ratio occurs entirely independently of a patient's body weight or baseline metabolic health. This initial neurological misfiring at the top of the endocrine chain establishes the conditions for massive downstream disruption within the ovarian machinery. Looking at this microscopic cross-section of an ovarian follicle, we see two primary functional layers, the outer theca cells and the inner granulosa cells. The persistently high levels of LH circulating from the brain bind heavily and specifically to receptors on the outer theca ring. This LH overload forces the theca cells to function as factories, overproducing androgens, primarily testosterone, and flooding the inner layers of the follicle. These elevated androgens trigger severe endoplasmic reticulum, or ER stress, within the neighboring granulosa cells. ER stress upregulates a specific target called death receptor 5. This initiates a rapid apoptosis cascade, causing the granulosa cells to permanently collapse and dissolve. Without functioning granulosa cells, the ovary is physically incapable of developing a dominant follicle. The death of these cells also causes a severe spike in anti-Müllerian hormone, which further strips any remaining FSH sensitivity from the follicle. At this stage, multiple small follicles begin the growth process, but mechanically cannot finish it. These arrested, immature follicles pile up around the edge of the ovary. As you see on this ultrasound, this is the source of the classic string of pearls morphology. They are trapped follicles, not cysts. The hallmark visible symptoms of the syndrome, anovulation, severe acne, and hair thinning, are the direct mechanical results of this androgen-induced cellular failure. Returning to our macro network map, we introduce the metabolic system, which acts as a powerful amplifier for this dysfunction. The majority of PCOS patients experience insulin resistance, a state where target cells fail to absorb glucose in response to normal insulin levels. This pathology appears even in non-obese individuals, often driven by genetic variations, such as mutations in the INSR insulin receptor gene. To compensate for this cellular resistance, the pancreas pumps out excess insulin, creating a state of hyperinsulinemia. This heavy flow of insulin travels directly to the ovaries and docks onto the same theca cells currently being bombarded by LH. This dual binding effect turbocharges the expression of the CYP17A1 gene, forcing a massive increase in testosterone biosynthesis. Simultaneously, the circulating insulin reaches the liver, where it exerts an equally destructive secondary effect. High insulin forcibly suppresses the liver's production of sex hormone-binding globulin, or SHBG. With less SHBG available to bind up testosterone, the concentration of free, active androgens in the bloodstream rises even further. This creates a devastating feedback loop. Insulin resistance directly worsens androgen excess, which in turn deepens the hormonal imbalance. The final layer locking this cycle in place is a state of chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation. Patients with PCOS frequently present with elevated circulating cytokines, including C-reactive protein and interleukin-6. One of the most destructive pro-inflammatory cytokines in this environment is tumor necrosis factor alpha, or TNF-alpha. TNF-alpha physically inhibits the phosphorylation of the insulin receptor tyrosine kinase. By blocking this receptor, inflammation directly impairs insulin signaling, effectively pouring biochemical gasoline on the patient's existing insulin resistance. This severe drop in insulin sensitivity forces the pancreas to secrete even higher volumes of insulin to maintain blood glucose levels. This newly elevated insulin travels right back to the ovaries, once again driving up testosterone production. Systemic inflammation is an active structural pillar that reinforces and accelerates the entire insulin-androgen cycle. This complete network map illustrates the reality of the syndrome. The brain, ovaries, pancreas, liver, and immune system operate as one continuous, self-amplifying loop. Because this hormonal loop dictates fat distribution and metabolism, weight gain is the biological result of the pathology, not the root cause. These distinct biological systems represent dimensions of a single patient profile. Targeting only one symptom, like irregular menstrual cycles, frequently fails because the broader network will automatically compensate and sustain the disease state. Effective management requires a multi-directional approach, simultaneously modulating insulin sensitivity, breaking the androgen cycle, and reducing systemic inflammation. Polycystic ovary syndrome is an intricate neuroendocrine and metabolic disorder. Respecting this multi-system architecture